concept of the release and how you feel. But I correlate physical waste with emotional waste. Because see, when you release that emotional waste, you're gonna feel just like you feel when you release physical waste. And that's when they get it. Oh yeah. Because I said you might have to strain a little bit because it's been inside you for 13 years. Now one issue you never talked about has been inside you for 13 years, 14 years. I had a situation 6 months ago. I was speaking to a 75-year-old man, married with 3 daughters. I broke this concept down to him. He came back to me 2 weeks later and shook my hand. He said, "Thank you." And I was like, "Okay." He said, "Man, I figured it out." He said, "I went home and apologized to my daughter and my wife." He said, "It happened to me when I was 12 years of age." And he started talking about that issue that happened to him when he was 12, which caused him to be so aggressive toward his daughters and his wife. So to answer your question, to get this man to understand the importance of why he got to release it, you got to show him the toilet.
Okay.
And break the concept down to him to say, just like what we went through. You can't argue with it. You can't argue with the concept. And if they don't get it after that, then they need more in depth. They still need to reach out to. I can share you some numbers that you can contact, but he has to come out of the stage of denial, and that's the way to get him out.
Okay, thank you. Also, I have one for Josh too. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Can I go ahead? So you talked about children with special needs and the importance of advocating for them, but you're currently running for sheriff's office. Is there any plan to train officers on how to respond to children with special needs or individuals with mental health illnesses? So that a lot of times officers they respond in an aggressive way. Is there a way to train them so that that's not the case?
Absolutely. One of the reasons why I'm running is because law enforcement officers and first responders they aren't adequately trained to do what she asked. I will share a small incident that happened with my child specifically. My child was at a event, and there were counselors there, and my daughter was touched inappropriately. And I was called by one of the counselors, and we called the police because someone had touched her inappropriately. And I let the officer know. I said, "Listen, I'm an officer, so you don't want me to go down there, so you need to go down there." So Chris Wayne was called. We sent them down there, and I said, "Listen, when you go down there, my daughter, she's autistic, she's high functioning, but she's nonverbal. So you're gonna have an issue." I told him already. He went down there. He went down there to get the interview, to get the report. And what type of report are you gonna get of a child like that? You go down there and you look, and first, she doesn't know what's going on. The counselors are afraid and they want to help, but they don't know what to do. And the law enforcement officer does his job and reported that the person who touched her was a volunteer. The incident was the person had bent down to tie my daughter's shoes because she has gross motor skills. She lacks those skills of tying shoes at the time. And when the person had tied her shoes, when he got up, he had touched her in her inner thigh. Luckily, she had on jeans that day, so it was nothing invasive, but a counselor saw it and did their job, which was to call us, and then we called the police. Come to find out, the person, the volunteer that was working there was a 19-year-old man, and upon further investigation, we found out the volunteer had a disability himself. And when we found that out, we just dropped the case. Where are you gonna go with that? And that's one of the reasons why I think it's vitally important that our officers have a better way, that we find a way. Because if they had a way, they would already been doing it by now. And this issue is not just here in Prince William, but it's a national issue, okay? It's a problem if a child can't speak up for themselves and fight for themselves. And if you're not there, if that person didn't see it or do their job, because everybody don't do their job. You know, luckily, somebody saw it that time. But what about the next time? So I think it's important that all of our officers, first responders, fire, EMS, that we make sure that we have adequate training for them, and not just a PowerPoint, because there is training. but it's not enough. If officers cannot speak to children and adults in a safe environment like this, how are they going to function when there's a real emergency, a real fire, a real active shooter in the school? If you can't talk to them now, what's going to happen when you tell them to get up and tell them or to get down and they jump up and run? You're going to shoot. And we've already had one of those incidents happen here in this county, one too many. So I think it is very vitally important that we train our officers and first responders to first know all the signs and symptoms, recognize quickly that this person has a disability, and to be able to de-escalate the situation. Take your time, slow down. There's no rush. It may be an emergency, but when you're working with somebody with special needs, you're gonna have to slow down, because if you move too fast, you might wind up putting handcuffs on them or shooting them, and now you're gonna be regretting that for the rest of your life. So that's one thing that's very important to me, and I think that we needed this years ago, and now it's time to get it.
Right now, we're dealing with a climate of where we have to be prepared and dealing with emergency preparedness. We're looking at shootings in the workplace and in the schools, and so all organizations need to have an emergency preparedness plan. I'm not quite sure if the organizations for which you work have them, or you're aware of them, or aware of what the policy and procedures are. So my topic, or the question I would like to pose to you, are you aware of the ones for where you work, or have you worked with organizations and making sure that they have a clear line of address to make sure it's focused on individuals with non-apparent and apparent disabilities, and what's your stance on that? And furthermore, since you work with law enforcement, does the law enforcement have a strategy on dealing with people with disabilities and let's say active shooter incidents with people with disabilities?
So I don't know if you guys have ever seen a fire drill at an elementary school or a high school. If the children with disabilities, they either come out first and then they do the drill, or they come out last after the drill. That's the emergency right there. That's the preparedness right there. So what you're telling me is that if there's a fire, a real fire, you're gonna take the special, hold the school up, and then send the kids out first or last. Or if there's an active shooter, the active shooter's gonna wait for you to move the special needs kids out, because the SRO that's at the high school is supposed to know.
SRO. Come on.
The school resource officers.
All right.
Schools have police officers there to protect the children and stuff like that in case that happens. But you got one school resource officer. Does the school resource officer know how many children have special needs? Does he or she know where the classrooms are? Do they know where all the exits of the businesses are? Do they know the schedule of the kids? Because let's just use an example of a fire alarm being pulled. Fire department's going to come. Police don't know. Next thing you know, if the active shooter starts to shoot, now you got two things going on. A fire drill could be kids don't know, and then after this has happened before. This is not a test case. This has happened. These school shootings happen all the time. So when you ask me, do they have a program? Yes, I just told you what it is, and that's why we have to find a better way. So I think the first step is for the SROs to know, the school resource officers to know where the special needs classrooms are, not just in elementary, middle school, high school, but in colleges also. They have kids and people who walk with them. They need to know where their classes are. Maybe they need to schedule to know where they are or something, but they need to know where they are so they can help them, because they are the most vulnerable folks. And they can't run and hide like everyone else. So to answer your question, yes, they have something. Is it adequate? No.